Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Center for Teaching Excellence's webinar, Setting Clear and High Expectations with Specifications Grading. My name is Casey Carroll. I am an instructional designer with the Center for Teaching Excellence, and I welcome all of you, especially new faculty. Welcome to USC. So this morning, we're going to talk about specifications grading. So what we want to talk about today is just kind of a new way to potentially think about grading. So when you think of grades or grading, what do you think of?
How well the students meet my expectations.
Awesome. We've got assessments, measurements, thanks Zeke, meeting expectations, exactly, performance, how we motivate students to do the work, right? Rubrics. Does everybody love grading? Like when it comes to the act of you actually having to assess things, is it your favorite part of teaching? It probably depend on the type of assessment, right? Stressful. And Kelly, only if they do well. Yeah, that's valid. For a lot of people, the actual act of grading or assigning grades is not associated with positive things necessarily. And even the kinds of things that you were putting in the chat about, like assessment, assignments, tests, a lot of those things tend to be focused on the extrinsic value, right? The outside external motivating factors of how do we force students to kind of come along to our content, right? How do we set markers up so that students are obliged to work enough to get to those things, right? What we want to do is look a little bit at specifications grading. So Linda Nilsson is a really just fantastic educational developer. She, I believe, founded, or she at least ran the Center for Teaching Excellence at Clemson for many, many years. She's retired now. But she literally wrote the book on specifications grading. And then there's a article that I put into the chat that is a really good kind of summary of it if you want to go a little deeper after we're done talking here. But the book itself is actually available as an ebook through our library. So what this is really, it's a framework to simplify grading and really put the focus back on learning. Like you said, it puts the focus back on the expectations of the students of what we want them to accomplish, not because we want them to fear failure or fear getting a bad grade, right? But because we want to entice them and encourage them and invite them to achieve to a high standard, right? So really this framework puts the responsibility on the students to earn grades, right? So we want to think that's true now, but in the way that we frame grades and assessment, is it? So what language do we use to talk about grades or grading? Is it our default to talk about students earning grades, or is it our default to talk about us giving students grades? So I think that this framework as well really kind of focuses on that earning of grades, right? So when we think of how students conceptualize kind of points, right? Do we think of kind of building up from 0, or do we think of subtracting from 100? So this really kind of puts it back into kind of starting from the beginning and earning and building up that grade and the accomplishments through the course, through the time of the course, versus assuming that everybody starts with 100 points and then you get deductions as you go along. So the focus becomes even more so on outcomes and mastery rather than kind of individual points. So this allows for creativity in how students accomplish the goals or demonstrate the mastery. And it can really help us make sure that we have aligned our assessments or our activities with those kind of course goals, right? Those course outcomes. So some of the benefits here, right, are that you can kind of look at, you can use this framework at a course level and or an assignment level, right? So you can kind of use this idea on individual assignments and not necessarily at the course level, or you can look at these things at a course level and not necessarily at an assignment level, or you can do a combination thereof, which will get to those actual elements here just in just 1 second. So if you like this idea, you could start with kind of one project, but you wouldn't necessarily have to do it for everything in your class immediately, right? So it gets rid of, or this framework kind of eliminates points. So it is essentially a pass or a pass-fail for what you're doing, is you kind of set those specifications and the students either earn them or they don't, or achieve them or they don't. So it gets rid of the possibility of grade grubbing through kind of specific criteria and that pass-fail system. And it can also kind of center student choice, student agency, and flexibility. So it can help with increased engagement in your course, making sure that students have personal relevancy, which we know is important for adult learners, and also providing a variety of different types of options or ways of achieving that, or ways of achieving those goals that can be beneficial for diverse learners. All right, so let's dive in to what it looks like. So there's kind of 3 primary elements, and when I said that it's a framework, it's really a couple of kind of concepts that you can utilize to piece together how it's going to look best for you. So there's not really a prescribed way to achieve this. It's rather a couple of tools that you can kind of work together and manipulate depending on your individual goals, your students, and the content that you teach. The main element here of specifications grading is, not surprisingly, the specifications, right? So specifications are essentially specific criteria that try to guide your students to mastery. So on this particular project, on this particular assignment, these are the things that one who is achieving at a high level can do. This is what I want you to be able to demonstrate, and that criteria, which we'll talk about here in a second as well, can really truly come directly from the language of your course outcomes, and your learning objectives, right? So the only grade assigned for assignments is either satisfactory or unsatisfactory. It's that kind of more positive language for that pass-fail, right? Satisfactory is not necessarily the same as passing in a traditional sense. So I think when we traditionally talk about the concept of pass, fail, it's essentially like a D and up is passing, and below that is a fail. The specifications here can be set, or should be set, at a high achieving standard. And so you may put that satisfactory bar at B+, A-, even A, right? Where it's really up there, so you're not necessarily kind of lowering these standards, right? So it's the high expectations of what you want them to achieve. And so you're not saying these are the minimum standards, you're saying that these are the standards. These are the high satisfactory standards. The detailed specifications for what is satisfactory is what's going to help your students the most. And this can also help with workload. So when you set up these specific criteria, which is really kind of even a more simpler kind of thing than a traditional rubric, when you're providing the feedback and kind of doing your grading, you only use those determined specifications to provide the feedback, right? So you're really going through that checklist to say, these are the things that are important. These are the things that I want you to be able to have done. You can provide other feedback, but it can kind of help guide you away. So in my classroom time, I have mostly been an English teacher, right? And so English teachers have a tendency to want to comment on everything, and that can really add to that time suck of grading and really take a lot of energy. And so if you can try to stick to the script of the specifications, you can do that primary thing, right? And if students don't achieve all of the specifications, you can turn it back to them. So that's when tokens come in, right? So the idea of tokens is essentially that they are passes, coins, whatever you want them to be. They can be tangible or not, but essentially students can use these tokens to achieve exactly like gold stars, stickers, whatever you want them to be. For additional revisions or other types of flexibilities, right? So you can decide what tokens mean for you. Some of the people that have used it in the past use it for essentially if you turn something in and it's unsatisfactory, you can use a token to do a revision. If you need more time, if a student needs more time on something, they can turn something in late, but it costs them a token, right? If they, so other types of choices, right? That they can, so that as well is a part of the agency of the students, right? Is they can choose, but it's within boundaries, right? So they don't get to turn in everything like just because they've chosen to. They have a finite resource of that flexibility, but it allows for them to do it and at a kind of no questions asked kind of a thing, right? I don't need an excuse for why you want to turn something in late if you're just going to expend a token. So the different tokens that you use, the number can kind of vary by the course level and the goals. I've heard about 2 or 3, so it just kind of depends. And especially if you try it out the first time, it's going to be something that you learn and grow from, right? So I personally would probably err more towards more tokens the first time. I would err more towards more tokens. I believe that the token concept in theory doesn't need to distinguish between unexcused or excused because they could be used for revisions which don't have anything to do with absences, or it could have something to do with turning in things late. It just kind of depends. So Zeke's question is if students earn the tokens, you give them to them at the beginning of the semester. I think kind of the baseline idea for specifications grading is that you give them at the beginning of the semester, that you just have a certain set amount. If you wanted to also have a mechanism by which they could earn them, you could do that too. But I would recommend that you start everybody with a certain amount of tokens, and then if you wanted to give them an opportunity to get more, that you could. But the ability to kind of revise and have some of that flexibility, I think, is important in general. So I would start with at least like 3 or something. But if you wanted to do kind of have that be maybe the benefit of like extra credit or something, I think that would definitely be a possibility. So bundles is kind of, so specifications are kind of the specific concepts and which can be done with the assignment level. When we're talking about course level grades, there are a couple of ways to determine the course level grades. You can use those specific criteria, but you kind of have to put it all together to get that course level grade, right? So there's kind of 2 ideas for those bundles. So kind of example one that I have here. So the course level grades can be determined by groups of assignments. So it can include different numbers, different types, or different difficulties of assignments to increase the level of challenge and the mastery of outcomes. And bundles should and can be explicitly tied to those course learning outcomes. So you may be able to get that directly from that language as well. So example one is that all bundles kind of contain the same assignments, right? But that you have a number of different bundles. So in order to, for example, achieve a D, you complete bundles 1 through 3. And if you want to get a higher grade than that, you have to complete additional bundles, right? And I've got some examples of what those bundles may include here in just a second, all the way up to an A, right? So example 2 is that bundles kind of include pretty much the same amount of assignments, but the number or the type of assignments kind of depends on the course level, right? So in order to achieve that level, you have to achieve everything in the category. And we will see some examples here. It is very rubric-y, right? So like, and essentially you can kind of, essentially for the individual assignments, I mean, a traditional rubric in a lot of ways really does kind of write out those like specifications, right? So you have specific grading criteria, but a traditional rubric is usually a matrix of different levels of achievement and different kinds of categories, right? And so what this does is it simplifies that concept down so that instead of you trying to kind of somewhat subjectively determine, is this a high medium, right? Is this a medium? Is this like a high low or like a low low, like on your levels of achievement of the rubric where you may have like 6 different things? It's just one level, right? You either satisfied it or you don't. Like this is what a great version of this looks like, and you either did it or you didn't. And so I think that when you kind of start writing these things out, it will look and feel like a rubric. Bundles can include, if you are using the specifications grading at a course level, they should include pretty much everything. It's just the determination of the satisfactory is what's going to do. So last fall, I worked with Dr. Courtney Lewis of the Southern Studies program in anthropology. And last spring, she taught 2 of her classes in using specifications grading. And we kind of did a little bit of a presentation this summer together with some of her examples, and she has graciously allowed me to use her course as an example here. So thank you to her. And so I've got a couple of examples of what course level bundles may look like, right? So this is an example of essentially, it's that example 2, right? Where you have each bundle or each kind of course level achievement is determined through different types of assignments, different levels of assignments. You can see here where in order to get a D, and she's even included attendance in this, right? In order to get a D, you attend 17 out of the 28 classes and you complete 8 out of the 15 discussion questions at a satisfactory level. That's it. And you don't co-lead a class, you don't do any of the other big projects. Basically, you show up and you participate a little bit. The C bundle, as we see here, has a higher standard. So Nilsson talks about hurdles. So kind of that the level of achievement that you're setting. So she talks about you can have more hurdles or higher hurdles. And so this is an example of both more hurdles and higher hurdles. And so she's added an additional an additional thing to accomplish at the C level, but she's also raised the difficulty of the other things like the attendance and the discussion questions, all the way up to the A, as we can see here, where you are and again, I think this is a great example because it's not 100%, right? So you don't have to attend every single class to get an A. You don't have to complete all of them. She allows for a little bit of that flexibility and choice of those things, but you do have to co-lead the class 2 times. You have to complete a proposal, her essay, which is essentially, it was her final project that could look at different kinds of things, right? So it's not that those who achieved an A have performed perfectly. It's just that they have performed to a high level. This is a different class, similar kind of thing. And as you can see, it was a different type of class, right? So her first one was an honors level course, which she had like a lot of big projects. And Madeline, this is an example of what it looks like to include exams in the bundle. And it's actually pretty simple here, is that she has separate lists, right? A separate specifications for what a satisfactory exam looks like. So she has a separate criteria as to what satisfactory looks like, but when it comes to kind of how that goes into the course grade, that satisfactory, it's just, you got to do three of them satisfactory, 4 for a C or a B, or 5 for an A. This is an example here of what a specific assignment specifications could look like. So the specifications themselves are going to vary widely by discipline and the type and the purpose of the assignment. So I would really start with the assignment objectives. What is it that you want them to achieve and demonstrate, and then go from there. Kind of use that language, be like, if the learning outcomes or objectives are supposed to say that this is what their students are going to do in this class, then that's what they should do in the assignment, right? Like that's what it should look like, and then you can start to break it down. So you can see that this is for an online discussion forum, and so it is not necessarily really super content based, but is more kind of format based. You can kind of work those things out. If you want to talk to me more about this, would like some additional information, I'd be happy to talk to you. So please email me, let me know. I'd be happy to work with you, especially for those of you who are new. Our instructional designers are available to help you with anything, not just specifications grading, but if you want us to look at a syllabus, talk to you about your class, any of those things, we are happy to do. And let me know if you need anything. All right. Thanks, everybody.